"You don't need a home office," my father said at dinner. "Your sister needs it more." I nodded, packed my things overnight, and moved out without a word. Not long after, my phone started ringing. Then it didn't stop. The spreadsheet on my laptop screen was a sea of red, a digital hemorrhage that I had been stanching with my own money for the better part of 5 years. I took a sip of lukewarm coffee and looked out the window of the detached guest house, my sanctuary, my office, my home. I had spent 6 months and $30,000 of my own savings renovating this glorified shed into a sleek, soundproofed workspace for my forensic accounting business. It was the only place on the property where the air didn't smell like lemon pledge and passive aggression. From here, I could see the main house. My parents were in the kitchen. I knew this because the lights were blazing, a habit they could afford only because I paid the electric bill. I was 28 years old, a tenant in my childhood home, yet I was the only reason the roof wasn't leaking and the internet had enough bandwidth to stream 4K video. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "Dinner in 10. Don't be late." "Big news." I sighed, closing the laptop. Big news. In this family usually meant someone had crashed a car or decided to adopt a rescue dog they couldn't walk. I saved my work, the quiet hum of my server rack the only sound in the room. This space was my identity. It was clean lines, ergonomic furniture, and silence. It was the antithesis of the chaotic, emotional clutter of the main house. I walked across the backyard. The grass was getting long. Dad hadn't mowed it, and I had stopped hiring the landscaper 2 weeks ago as a test. Nobody had noticed yet. Inside, the kitchen was warm and smelled of roast chicken. My sister, Brittany, was sitting at the table, scrolling through her phone with a manic intensity. Her boyfriend, Jax, a man who described himself as a content creator, but mostly just created messes, was leaning against the counter, eating a roll before dinner was even served. "There she is," Dad said, looking up from his newspaper. He didn't say hello. He just acknowledged my arrival as a function of the dinner service beginning. "The internet is lagging again, Allison. You need to look at the router." "I'm working on a client audit, Dad. I'll check it weekend," I lied. I knew exactly why it was lagging. Jax was likely downloading terabytes of raw footage for his vlog. "It's annoying," Mom chimed in, placing a platter of chicken on the table. "We pay enough for it." "We." The royal we. I sat down, unfolding my napkin. "So what's the news?" Brittany looked at Jax, her eyes wide and shimmering with that performative gloss she used for her TikTok thumbnails. She reached out and took his hand. "Well," she began, her voice pitching up an octave. "We've been waiting to tell you guys. I'm pregnant." The silence lasted 3 seconds before Mom shrieked. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated validation. She rushed around the table to hug Brittany. Dad stood up, pumping Jax's hand as if the guy had just won a Nobel Prize rather than successfully failing to use contraception. "A baby!" Mom cried, wiping a tear. "Oh, finally! A grandbaby!" I sat still, forcing a smile onto my face. "Congratulations," I said. "That's a big step." "It's huge," Jax said, nodding solemnly. "We're going to document the whole journey. The brand deals are going to be insane. Family channels are the highest CPM right now." "That's wonderful," Dad said, beaming. Then, the inevitable pivot happened. The gears in his head turned, grinding loudly enough for me to hear them. He looked at Brittany, then at Jax, and then, slowly, his eyes slid over to me. "But where will you put a nursery?" Dad asked, the question hanging in the air like smoke. "Your room is too small." "We know," Brittany said, pouting slightly. She looked at me. It wasn't a look of sisterly affection. It was the look a predator gives a wounded gazelle. "We were thinking, we need a studio too, for the baby content. We need lighting, space for the crib, a place to edit." "The guest house?" Mom said. It wasn't a question. It was a solution. My stomach dropped, but my face remained a mask of professional detachment. "The guest house?" I repeated. "You mean my office?" "It's perfect," Jax said, pointing a chicken bone at me. "It's already soundproofed. We just need to paint it, maybe rip out that desk to make room for the crib and the green screen." "Allison can move back into the main house," Dad said, slicing into his chicken. "The old sewing room is empty. It's got a bed." "The sewing room is a closet, Dad," I said, my voice steady. "And I run a business out of the guest house. I paid for the renovation. I pay rent for that space." Oh, Allison, don't be selfish, Mom snapped, her celebratory mood instantly curdling into irritation. This is your sister. She's having a baby. They need to get on their feet. Once the channel takes off, they'll buy a mansion. This is just temporary. Temporary, I echoed. Like the time Jax needed to borrow my car for a week and kept it for 3 months. Hey, the transmission blew on its own, Jax said defensively. It's family, Dad said, slamming his hand on the table. The cutlery rattled. We make sacrifices for family. You're single. You don't need all that space. You're just sitting out there looking at spreadsheets. Brittany is building a life. I looked at them. Really looked at them. I saw Mom, who hadn't balanced a checkbook since 1998 because I did it for her. I saw Dad, who thought the roof repaired itself last year because I hired the contractors and paid the invoice while he was thinking about it. I saw Brittany, the golden child, who had never been told no in her 24 years of existence. And I saw Jax, a parasite attached to a host I was currently keeping on life support. They didn't see a daughter or a sister. They saw a resource, a utility. I was the electricity, the water, and the bank. And now they wanted to harvest my space because they assumed I would just regenerate. Something inside me didn't break. It crystallized. It became cold and hard and incredibly sharp. Okay, I said. The table went quiet. They had expected a fight. They had prepared their guilt trips and their emotional blackmail, and I had just disarmed them. Okay? Mom asked, suspicious. You're right, I said, picking up my wine glass. The baby comes first. If they need the space to launch their career, they should have it. See? Dad smiled, relieved. I knew you'd be reasonable. I'll need a few days to clear my equipment out, I said. I can have it ready by the 1st of the month. That's great, Allie, Brittany squealed, clapping her hands. We're going to paint it sage green. It's so aesthetic. Sage green sounds lovely, I said. I took a sip of wine. It tasted like vinegar, but I swallowed it anyway. I wasn't surrendering. I was initiating an exit strategy. The move was surgical. I didn't announce I was leaving the property. I simply told them I was moving my heavy equipment into storage to make room for Brittany. I found an apartment downtown. It was expensive, modern, and on the 16th floor. It had a doorman and a view of the skyline. I signed the lease the next morning. Over the next week, I dismantled my life. I packed my servers, my monitors, my files. I hired movers to come while the family was out at a celebratory brunch I couldn't attend due to work. But the physical move was the least of it. The real work was administrative. I sat at my desk, the one Jax wanted to rip out, and logged into the family accounts. The electric bill, transferred to Dad's name. The water, Dad's name. The high-speed fiber internet business package, canceled. Reverted to the basic residential plan under Mom's email. The landscaping service, canceled. The streaming services, logged out. Password changed. The emergency credit card I had given Mom for groceries that was currently being used for Sephora runs, reported lost, account closed. I wasn't vindictive. I didn't cut the power lines or smash the router. I simply removed my name and my wallet from the equation. I returned the household to its natural state, a state they hadn't experienced in years. On my last day, I swept the guest house clean. It echoed, empty and hollow. I left the keys on the kitchen counter of the main house with a note. All yours. Good luck with the channel. I didn't say goodbye. I just got in my car and drove away. The first week was peaceful. My phone was quiet. I imagined they were too busy measuring curtains and painting walls sage green to notice I wasn't sleeping in the sewing room. I watched the disaster unfold through the lens of social media. Brittany posted a house tour video. Hey guys, welcome to the new studio, she chirped, panning the camera around the guest house. It looked smaller without my furniture. They had thrown a beanbag chair in the corner and hung some fairy lights. We're going to create so much magic here. The comments were sparse. User 123, is that a garage? Bot 77, promoted on my page. 2 weeks in, the first text arrived. Mom, hey, the internet is super slow. Netflix keeps buffering. Did you change the password? I waited 3 hours to reply. Me, I canceled my business account when I moved out. You guys are on the standard plan now. You might need to upgrade if you want 4K. Mom, moved out? What do you mean moved out? We thought you were just at the office late. Me, no, I got an apartment. The sewing room wasn't going to work for me. Enjoy the grandbaby prep. She didn't reply to that. She probably didn't know how to process it. The function had removed itself from the machine. A week later, Dad called. I let it go to voicemail. Voicemail. Allison, call me back. The landscaping guy didn't show up. The grass looks like a jungle. And there's a weird noise coming from the water heater. I texted back. I canceled the landscaper. You'll have to mow it or hire someone new. YouTube has videos on water heaters. Dad, I don't have time for this. I'm busy. Me too. Work is crazy. I put the phone on Do Not Disturb and poured myself a glass of expensive red wine. The silence in my apartment was heavy, but it was a good weight, like a weighted blanket. By month 2, the cracks were becoming canyons. I watched Brittany's TikToks. The content was tragic. Day in the life of a pregnant creator. The video showed her sitting in the guest house, looking bored. The lighting was bad because they hadn't bought professional lights. They had just assumed the room was magically photogenic. So the Wi-Fi sucks out here, she complained to the camera. And it's freezing. The heater makes this banging noise so we can't record audio. She looked tired. Not the cute, glowing tired. The stressed tired. Then came the "We Need Support" GoFundMe link in her bio. Unexpected expenses for the nursery. I checked the goal. $5,000. Raised $45. The reality of the studio was setting in. Without my business paying the rent, the utilities, and the upkeep, the guest house wasn't an asset. It was a liability. It was a drafty, detached building that increased their electric bill and required maintenance they couldn't afford. Jax had stopped appearing in the videos. Rumor had it, via a cousin on Facebook, that he was focusing on his gaming career inside the main house because the guest house Wi-Fi was too weak. The climax arrived in November. The first frost had hit. My phone rang at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. It was Mom, then Dad, then Brittany. I answered Brittany's call because I knew she was the weakest link. Allie? Her voice was shaking. She sounded young, younger than she had in years. What's wrong? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. The power is out, she sobbed. It's freezing. I can see my breath in the studio. Jax tried to plug in 3 space heaters because the main heat died, and there was a spark, and now everything is dark. Did you check the breaker? I don't know what a breaker is, she screamed. Dad is yelling at Mom because there's a disconnect notice on the table he didn't see. They're saying you didn't pay the bill. I didn't, I said calmly. It's not my house, Britt. But you always pay it. You know they forget things. How could you do this to me? I'm pregnant. I know you are, I said. That's why you have a partner and parents, to take care of you. They can't, she wailed. Dad says he doesn't have the liquidity until next week. Allison, please. It's cold. I closed my eyes. The old reflex, the urge to fix, to save, to be the hero, twitched in my chest. It would be so easy. I could open my banking app, pay the bill, call an emergency electrician, and have the lights on in an hour. But then I remembered the dinner. You're single. You don't need the space. I can't help you, Britt, I said. What do you mean you can't? You have money. I do, I agreed. But I'm not the homeowner. And I'm not the tenant anymore. This is a family issue. You guys need to figure it out. You're a bitch, she hissed. A jealous, bitter bitch. Maybe, I said. But I'm a warm bitch. Good luck, Britt. I hung up. Then I blocked the number for the night. 3 days later, I agreed to meet them. Not at the house. I wasn't stepping foot on that property, but at a diner halfway between my apartment and their decaying kingdom. They looked rough. Dad's shirt was wrinkled. Mom looked like she hadn't slept. Brittany was wearing a massive hoodie, looking sullen. Jax wasn't there. He's at his mom's house, Brittany muttered when I asked. The Wi-Fi is better there. So, Dad started, clearing his throat. He tried to summon his old authority, the patriarch demanding tribute, but it faltered. We got the power back on. Cost me an arm and a leg for the emergency fee. That's good, I said, sipping my black coffee. Allison, this has to stop, Mom said, her voice trembling with indignation. You've made your point. You've punished us. Now it's time to come home. I laughed. It was a short, dry sound. Home? You mean the sewing room? We can move things around, Dad said quickly. Maybe Brittany and Jax can use the basement. You can have the guest house back. We need you there, Allie. The house is falling apart. The finances are a mess. I don't know the passwords to the mortgage portal. Reset them, I said. What? Click forgot password. Reset them. It's not quantum physics, Dad. It's not just the passwords, Brittany snapped. It's everything. We can't afford the heating oil for the guest house. The roof is leaking in the kitchen. We need money, Allie. The baby is coming in 3 months. Then Jax needs to get a job, I said. And you need to stop buying props for videos nobody watches. It's a career, she shouted, drawing stares from the other booths. It's a hobby, I corrected, my voice hard. And it's an expensive one that you are funding with other people's money, specifically mine. But the bank is closed. Mom reached across the table, trying to grab my hand. I pulled it back. We're family, she pleaded. Her eyes were wet. Doesn't that mean anything to you? We raised you. You did, I nodded. And then, when I became an adult, I raised you. I carried you for 5 years. I paid your debts. I fixed your mistakes. And the moment I had something of my own, one room, one small piece of independence, you took it away because you thought I didn't deserve it. You thought my comfort was negotiable. We didn't think. Dad started. Exactly, I cut him off. You didn't think. You assumed. You assumed I would always be there to catch you. But I'm not the safety net anymore. I'm just your daughter. And right now, I'm a daughter who is enjoying her life. I placed a $20 bill on the table for my coffee. I'm not coming back, I said, standing up. I'm not fixing the roof. I'm not paying the electric bill. And I'm definitely not funding a nursery for a baby that is being brought into a house that can't even keep the lights on. So you're just going to abandon us? Dad demanded, his face reddening. After everything? I'm not abandoning you, I said, looking down at them. They looked smaller than I remembered. I'm letting you be adults. It's what you always wanted to be, right? The ones in charge? Well, you're in charge now. Handle it. I walked out of the diner. The air outside was cold, biting, and incredibly fresh. I checked my phone. A notification from my bank. Deposit received. Client retainer, $15,000. I smiled. Back at the house, I knew the reality was setting in. The sage green walls of the studio were probably peeling in the damp cold. The camera ring light was off. Jax was likely ghosting Brittany now that the free ride was over. Dad was staring at a pile of bills he couldn't read, and Mom was realizing that grandbaby content didn't pay for groceries. They would survive. Or they wouldn't. They would sell the house, or they would learn to budget. They would force Jax to work at a warehouse, or Brittany would have to move into social housing. It wasn't my problem. I got into my car, connected my phone to the Bluetooth, and put on a playlist. I didn't look back at the diner. I merged onto the highway, heading toward the skyline, toward the 16th floor, toward a life that was finally, completely mine. Family is important, sure. But as I accelerated, watching the suburbs fade in the rearview mirror, I realized something crucial. You can't set yourself on fire just to keep other people warm, especially when they complain about the smoke.